Now, still on the subject of the Olympics, Olympic stadiums are often aimed for this sort of totemic status. They're this centrepiece of the Games. Think of Beijing's iconic bird's nest. But in London, the centrepiece is being built with a rather different philosophy. Bruce Orwall interviewed the architect. What are we doing different here in London?
Well, you know, as you mentioned, a lot of times stadiums, architects are assigned to build stadiums that are these temples to sport or to a particular team or sports franchise. Here they built this stadium with the mind of disassembling part of it, because after the Games, they don't want to get stuck with the kind of situation that we've seen in many Olympic cities, where the
like Athens, for example,
Athens or even Beijing, which is such a such an iconic building, and yet they really don't have anything to do with it in China. It's so unused that during the winter they have sledding events that you bring your kids there because there's nothing else that happens.
All right, so not a great success. So you interviewed the architect. I mean, how does this change their thinking? I mean, they're no longer making these great statement buildings that are going to be here for generations. So what are they thinking about?
Well, this stadium is built by a firm called Populous, which is one of the biggest sports architecture firms in the world. They did the new Yankee Stadium in New York. They did the Emirates football stadium for the Arsenal here. Right. So, you know, they've done, big, exciting buildings. They initially didn't understand, they didn't have, as the architect Rod Sheard told me, didn't have the foggiest idea how to approach this, because as architects, they're trained to do things that are sturdy and beautiful and lasting. Those are the original principles of Greek architecture. So what they had to do was think about, how do we do something that's temporary, and how do we embrace that? And that meant, all sorts of things in the end, like using color palettes that you wouldn't normally use for a permanent stadium, because light fades color.
Oh, and it'll look really muddy and horrible.
You don't have to worry about in certain parts of the stadium that, whether light is going to fade the colors that you're using, because they're going to go away.
Now, is this part of a trend that we're seeing? Because we in the World Cup bid, I mean, Qatar has this thing about it was going to dismantle its stadiums and then I think was going to send them to Africa. This stadium in London, they're going to take the top layer off, and I think some of the other things are moving. Is this part of a trend that we're seeing in sports?
I think it is, particularly for big, sort of short-term events like this. In Chicago, when they unsuccessfully bid for the 2016 Games, they went even further than the London bid and tried to, basically make almost all of the venues temporary in this way. As you mentioned, Qatar is doing something similar to what they're doing in London, which is, a lot of the stadiums are either going to be somewhat or completely dismantled, and the seats are going to be distributed, to other parts of the world where they can be used.
Yeah. Just back on London, I mean, there's been a lot of controversy over this and a lot of fighting and squabbling over the future of the stadium. Do we know what's going to happen to it?
We don't yet. I mean, they initially had planned to have this resolved a year or two ago. The idea was that you were going to, the stadium has 25,000 permanent seats and 55,000 temporary ones. You would downsize it to some degree, and it would be turned over to a football club in the UK. But there's been a lot of debate about whether clubs want the track left in there because it puts fans further away. So it's not done yet. Hopefully this fall.
Excellent. Bruce, thank you very much indeed.